I can speak English. That's very important, people.
No.
SGC here, back again. We have 2 cameras cause this is real. We're upgrading for this segment. This is Road to Infinity. We have less than a month till Infinity Wars, and we got Vulcan here back again just to talk about all the Marvel films that have been released from 2008, starting with Iron Man, all the way to this year's Black Panther. So we're going to break it down into segments, movie per video. We're just going to talk about our impressions. We are going to rewatch every film. We're going to try to talk about just what are the differences of watching it back then and watching it now. Do we have casting thoughts? How are we feeling about it now? How do we feel about Iron Man after watching 18 other films or what have you? But granted, we are rewatching every film, so it's like fresh. So we're not doing this through nostalgia. If you ask me to do 2008 again, I'll be like, yeah, I don't remember. Especially like Hulk. Hulk, I really had to rewatch. So first up, we are here for 2008's Iron Man. So this was directed by Jon Favreau. I can't speak English. That's very important, people.
No.
And we have a team of screenwriters.
Yeah.
This is actually pretty impressive for a movie to be like this with 4 screenwriters.
They have like a script going around in the 90s, and then they, segue into 2000s, and then they start from scratch again.
I mean, like, usually nowadays when you watch films, you check out who writes stuff. And usually films are better when you have, maybe 1 or 2 screenwriters, so things are more controlled, less cooks in the kitchen type of thing.
Yeah.
And
less studio pointing nose at you.
Yes. So also, if you don't know, Kevin Feige is the man, and you actually, I think Marvel really taught me to be like, check out who produced things.
Mm-hmm.
Producers literally actually matter.
Yes.
Because it's not just like, oh, random associate producer or executive producer, but actually see this guy working so hard for this universe. And this is his first MCU film with Avi Arad. I can read his history. Is pretty impressive. You got, 98, you got Blade.
He produced X2, I remember.
He produced X-Men, Blade 2, Spider-Man, Daredevil, X2, 2003 Ang Lee's Hulk, The Punisher, Spider-Man 2, Blade Trinity, Elektra, Fantastic Four, holy crap, X-Men and The Last Stand.
Bottom line is he knows comic.
And the cinematography is by Matthew Libatique. I mean, and he goes off after Iron Man, and he does like Iron Man 2, and he's doing the upcoming Venom. So this guy's been around, straight out of Compton.
Okay.
That's a lot of Requiem for a Dream, like you said.
Oh, I thought you mean he's straight out of Compton. Like he's from Compton.
So imagine 2008. You're in a theater in May. What were your thoughts about this Iron Man?
Okay, I was with a bunch of friends in high school. I think it was grade 11. And then we were so excited to kick off the summer with a superhero movie because, there was also the Hulk is coming out that summer. Dark Knight is coming out that summer. And to watch Iron Man first, it was really fresh because of how action-packed and dramatically filled it was. So it was a really good ride.
Okay. For me, I don't remember.
No.
I know I was watching more movies back then, but I don't know. It just wasn't a vivid, like, punch in the face of amazingness for me. I mean, it's funny now when I, like, always talk about, like, best MCU films. Iron Man's always up there. So I don't know why. Maybe I just, like the fact that, Hulk, Dark Knight, Hellboy all came out the same year boggles my mind. It feels like they shouldn't have came out the same year because they just are so different.
Superhero overload.
And they were just like different qualities and memorable. Now, fast forward 10 years, we rewatched this.
Gosh,
How did you feel rewatching this?
I'm still very happy because it holds up really well. Yeah, it's not because of the CGI. And just the story-wise, I do think it's a redemption story. At first, it was just this playboy, Robert Downey Jr. or Tony Stark is this playboy character who has gone through like a really dramatic change, yet it was not too cheesy because you felt for the character. It was a life and death situation. There were consequences of his behavior in the beginning of the movie.
Right.
And you felt it. And
Yeah.
I felt it too.
I think, rewatching this aged perfectly well, except for every time they pick up a cell phone.
Yeah, there's no iPhones, no Apple back then.
It's OG for some reason.
And then with those like 8-bit ringtone.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think like the CGI like totally stands for its time. I think it's used sparingly. Like they really amp up the CGI when it really matters.
There were some miniatures too. Like you could see there was some actual miniatures effect.
Well, I mean, like they probably created actual suits.
Yeah.
To just put
for close-ups, I'm pretty sure they need an actual suit for it.
Like one that's just being suited up and everything. That CGI totally fine.
Yeah. Because CGI in superhero movie was kind of a joke in the early 2000s. Remember all those, like when Daredevil came out, when Catwoman came out?
Oh yeah, it was so
like,
over the top.
It was just like you were playing a PS2 video game.
Yeah, like you clearly knew when it was fake.
So I do think Iron Man is one of the first movies that tell us, we're there now, like CG wise. So my favorite scene was when Tony was in the cave of Afghanistan building his first Iron Man suit with Yinsen. There was the point of no return for Tony. Like he knows the world he believed that was safe, that he could be a dick around in. It's not there anymore. It was never there. All his belief was just shattered. And then that was the part where he started picking himself back up again, especially when Yinsen died in front of him. And then that's really pushed him to become Iron Man.
I think for me, it's the scene where he test drives Mark II, like the silver one. And it's like Jarvis is like, okay, shutting down. He's like, no, let's not. Let's take it for a spin. You gotta run or fly before you can walk.
Yeah.
It's like that moment where he's like fully embracing that he's done this. He's proving himself, and he goes off, super high, and it gets frozen, and it fixes the problem, and it comes back later on in the film. But the moment where he like lands and shuts off, and he like falls through the roof and everything,
and to the basement.
Yeah, the basement, and I really enjoyed that because it was like that reminder that he's still, he's not the top of the world type of thing. He's not totally in control. He's still tinkering and he's still learning.
Still try and error.
Because I feel like if they didn't have that, then it's just like super OP and overpowered, and we're done here. I am Iron Man. Let me kick your ass. But it's like nope. He has still a lot of stuff to learn. So I really did enjoy that scene.
When this movie was made in 2008. This project was, tossed around in the early 90s from studios to studios before ending up back to MCU again. And at some point, Nicolas Cage was attached to the project.
That's crazy.
And that's why at one point, he could be Superman and Iron Man. And now he's only Ghost Rider.
An animated Superman. Like for me, I feel like that's the thing. Why I say I don't have an impression when I watch this in the beginning is because I was so still basic in terms of knowledge of like film and like actors and directors and things, so I didn't really think about that stuff. But even now, I don't know, Downey has done such a good job with 3 Iron Mans, 2 Avengers, so that's Spider-Man. 5 films, so 6 films to really own this character. So I feel like he is Iron Man. I mean, it's the same as like Hugh Jackman with like Wolverine. Like who can you? I can't even recast him now that he's done. And I love how with MCU that they really let their actors really own their characters and roles. I mean, seriously, like Thor, Captain America. Because I mean, nowadays you always hear about like superhero fatigue or whatever, but back then it was still like, whoa. We just got Batman a few years ago.
It was the dawn it was the renaissance of superhero movies, because superhero movies was just hit and miss back then.
Okay, so how about your thoughts on casting?
Pepper Potts was a hand in glove fit with Gwyneth Paltrow, not overreacting to Tony's behavior. Jeff Bridges as Obadiah, I felt, is more like, I'm the bad guy and I'm a good actor.
Yeah,
so,
I think his was just a name grab. It's like, oh my goodness, Jeff Bridges. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like his performance was decent, but I feel like it could have been anyone else.
He did the most he could work with, though.
That's true. So then we got Terrence Howard as Rhodey.
Which I really missed in Iron Man 2. Like you said, he was an Air Force pilot.
Yeah.
He got that swag going on in the first one, but in the second one, when Don Cheadle came in, it's like, oh.
I think it's just
the physique.
The physique and just how he carries himself. I think Terrence
He's
Howard.
more humble. He's more humble in the second one, definitely.
Yeah, it feels like two different characters. Like Terrence Howard, sort of in the beginning, where he's like, "Oh my goodness, you should have rode in the same Humvee as me," and that vibe just carries on throughout the film, where he's like, you know, I'm trying to protect you, but at the same time, it's like I gotta do my job.
And it could be he's smart enough to be Tony's best friend.
Yeah, that too. Cameos are pretty funny. I mean, we got like Stanley.
Stanley again.
Is this the first one?
No, like in every other Marvel movie, Stanley is in those movies. Like
he was in Ang Lee.
He was in Ang Lee's Hulk. He was in Spider-Man.
Okay, how about like the story breakdown, like as just the movie itself, just looking at Iron Man. What are your thoughts?
Again, it's really very much like the hero's journey at first, and then it kind of really shows Tony's character because he was trying to like make not make fun of, but like make jokes with the soldiers who were kind of who was kind of like a little bit tight.
Yeah.
And then you see soldiers getting attacked left and right by unknown forces.
Yeah.
And he was captured, and then I'm like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
Boom, and then goes the title card.
Yeah.
So like it really captured my attention. I'm like, oh, so what happened to him? What got him to this point?
Yeah, like I love moments like those where it actually matters that it's like 36 hours before. Because I hate the films where they pull off this narrative, but you don't care how they got there. Because you're just like, okay, that was exciting enough, but let's just continue the story. But here it's like, why was he in the Humvee? Why is he like
getting attacked
in the middle of nowhere? Like you want to know, and like what was he doing there? Because there's so many films that pull this narrative off, but it's like you don't care what was leading up to it because usually it's just something stupid or the payoff isn't even
well, it's like a subplot, but this one is actually like plot related.
Yeah, like he's not gonna die in the cave, so you're like, how is he gonna get out? What's gonna go down? So you're like intrigued, curious, committed. So
I also enjoyed the opening sequence because of many things that it didn't do. Like at first, there's no voiced over.
Oh yeah.
And there's no like you have to read what Iron Man is go through like a scroll of titles and things like that, like the cheap way of getting to know a character.
It's like Tony Stark was in MIT, blah blah blah.
They did that in a very creative way.
Yeah, so that was good. You know, the villain. I like how they pulled it off, where it's not really villain driven. It's like you were saying, self discovery and
it was more like self destruction because without getting captured at Afghanistan, like Tony doesn't really have a reason to change. Yeah. Because he's his genius. He's like, people dub him as a Da Vinci. He likes it, but he denies it. But he likes to be called like, this rock star kind of designer or engineer. Mm-hmm. Like he's this character who just really has to go through a big change in life in order for us to care for him, or he's just gonna be a really cool, like person who is a dick to people around him or doesn't care about the world.
Mm-hmm. I think like the strongest part about this film is Downey being Iron Man and discovering himself, which makes it so much harder to make a compelling villain. So like when Obadiah finally comes out and he's like, I'm the Ironmonger, blah blah blah, you don't really care, and when he takes over the company, you're like, oh whatever. So even like the big display of like destruction at the end, like for me, the third act is the weakest of the entire movie because you just like. What?
And the interesting thing is like Tony is so smart of a hero that even the villain has to use his technology. Like not just for Obadiah, but like for Ultron.
Yeah, I think that's the thing though. This is what sort of paves the way for the rest of the MCU, where the villain is sort of like a reflection of our hero. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's done so often that you're just like, this is so dumb. Like next we got Hulk. So that's the thing about like MCU is like the villains just can't take a break, where it's just they never really deliver. Mm-hmm. That the villain has to be somehow really connected to our hero, but at the same time, when you watch other films, they're not always like that. So I feel like the villain always loses out. It's always someone connected to the hero. That's why I really enjoyed what's his face, Crossbones. Like Crossbone to me is what the comic world sort of villains are like. You see them in one film, they don't really do much. The next they come out and it's bigger, but they still don't do much. I think that's my issue with most of MCU is that they don't have thug level tiered villains where they're sort of a threat but not. Because if you always have just one main villain, blah. But at the same time, you can go the extreme opposite of doing it so wrong, like Spider-Man 3, where it's just like villain everywhere. And that's just too much. Like, I feel like if Obadiah could have some different ways of defeating Iron Man, would have been more enticing. Because then at the same time, it would break itself apart from Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
Which is, again, using the same tech.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about that movie later on. But it just does that. Like, when you keep seeing it, you're just like, come on, what's next? Okay, now we're going to get a villain who's somehow related. That's why, Guardians, the first Guardians was great. Like the villain wasn't connected to Quill. Or I mean, the fact that you have a team, so it's a lot more stuff to play with. So yeah, that's it. You have any, like, last thoughts about this film?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this movie, and it's a good superhero movie, and it's a good movie.
When I rewatched it, I noticed that
you appreciate it more.
The soundtrack is very evident too. It's like very obvious that there's soundtrack and it's used well. Like for a general audience, like for a person that probably watches 5 films a year, like this will stand out. How they use the music, and it's like it sticks, and it's just like they add it during like those really intense moments or really like epic moments. So yeah, I applaud them for the soundtrack and where they put it. So good editing on that part. So yeah, so that's it. We're done
Iron Man.
For this first segment of Iron Man a decade ago. So next up we have
Oh no, I fell. No.
Anyways, join us again for
With
this Incredible Hulk.
With this journey.
There we go. The first episode to The Road to Infinity. Out.